Greetings, greenhouse people. It's time for another episode of Tech on Demand brought to you by Grower Talks magazine. If you don't receive Grower Talks and Green Profit every month, head over to growertalks.com and subscribe. We've been bringing news and information to the industry for more than 75 years, so if you're not a subscriber, it's about time. And speaking of subscribing, be sure to subscribe to the Tech on Demand podcast on your favorite app. Once you subscribe, you'll never miss an episode. I'm your host, Bill Calkins, and I'm really happy to be joined once again by an awesome guest who can both educate and entertain on topics that might maybe be a little bit dry or technical, but I'm excited to be joined by Dr. Janna Beckerman from Envu, who's here to talk foliar disease, focusing on the ABCs, anthracnose, Botrytis, and cercospora. Dr. Janna Beckerman is the new ornamentals technical specialist at Envu and part of their green services team. Prior to Envu, she worked at Purdue University and the University of Minnesota as a professor of plant pathology for almost 25 years. Janna continues to focus on developing environmentally sound pest management strategies that are economically feasible for growers and pest managers of specialty crops, and is now excited to also focus on insect and weed management. Welcome, Janna. How are you doing?
Oh, thank you so much, but I am clutching my pearls because you were implying that this isn't the most exciting topic ever.
No, it is. I think for growers, these are things that they're going to deal with year to year and hopefully gain some expertise from podcasts like this one and articles that you and the other folks from Envu write. So I guess dry might be the wrong word because when they pop up in the greenhouse, they're anything but boring, right?
This is true, and most people would really prefer not to have that kind of excitement when my little buddies pop up. So
It's true. But I think before we get started, before we jump into the A, B's, and C's, anytime I have a plant pathology expert on the podcast, it's good to talk through the previous season, what's been going on this year, some diseases that might stick out in your head as being particularly bad this spring or even on your radar for the fall. Any thoughts for nursery or greenhouse producers on diseases they might have encountered or might be smart to watch out for?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. One of the nicest things about this job is I get to travel the country and talk to growers everywhere. So I really get to see the spectrum of issues. And rusts actually were a surprise that those had popped up in several nurseries. Some of the less common rusts, whether we were talking about rust on heuchera or it was rust on buckthorn. The fringe buckthorn. And that's actually an oat crown rust. And it's not something that you generally learn a lot about. Economically, it's really important for oat growers, but the alternate host is the buckthorn. And we have that fringe leaf buckthorn that's so popular in the industry. And so that was a new one. And we'll be talking more another time maybe about how to control that. But I always like surprises. I know growers don't like surprises, but I like surprises.
What causes rust? Is that environmental? Is it? I mean, it's a.
Oh, great question. Yeah. So that's a fungus that causes buckthorn rust, and I'm trying to remember if it's a Puccinia or gonna guess it's a Puccinia off the top of my head, but I might have to eat that one there. They're fungi that are basidiomycetes, so they're very different than the fungi that we're talking about today, which are ascomycetes. They're about as similar to, it's really hard because we don't have the familiarity in language like we do with insects. People know that beetles and caterpillars are different, but rust fungi and botrytis are, they're about as different as crustaceans are from mammals. They're profoundly different. Even though crustacean and mammals are both animals, this is the same with our molds and our rusts, but they're very cool. So maybe in the future we'll do something on rusts because they're fun.
And was that in the spring?
That is a spring disease. It is something that, similar to like your cedar apple rust or cedar hawthorn rust, or what I prefer to call them juniper rusts. Those also are in the spring. So they can be managed. There's a discrete time when, if you time your fungicides correctly, you can prevent it from going to your buckthorn. And, that's a problem there because obviously none of us are spraying our oats in the field to protect them. So maybe sowing our wild oats, but we're not spraying our wild oats.
That's awesome. Anything that you're hearing about right now as growers are producing, I guess, poinsettias, garden mums, anything popping up
Pythium.
on the radar?
Yeah, Pythium is already rearing its ugly little sporangiophore. So in multiple places, it's coming in on liners, and but that is even though mums and poinsettias are annuals, the Pythium is a perennial problem on these crops, and it's something that we always have to prepare for. There's a lot of solutions out there. Of course, Envu, we actually have a great representation for Pythium controls, whether you're looking at Banol or Terrazol. We have a new product we're hoping to have come out next year. The active ingredient is picarbutrizox. So lots of options available. And of course, there's Segway as well.
Sure.
So.
Okay. Well, I think every season brings new challenges, and aren't we all lucky about that?
It's job security. When I was young, I used to think I was going to work myself out of a job, but I'm not worried about that anymore.
I don't think so.
The fungi are so much smarter than we are.
There you go, and evolving and changing.
Exactly. But there's gazillions of them, and there's just two of us. So
that's true. That's a good point. So why did you pick anthracnose, botrytis, and cercospora as the three issues you wanted to cover today? It's not just because they're A, B, and C, because you can probably name like 100 diseases for each of those letters. But why were those the three that you wanted to talk about on the podcast today?
Okay, so I feel like you're calling out my nerdiness, and I will completely own that. But I started with anthracnose because that was one of the spring problems, particularly on lupins. Multiple growers were having significant issues in their lupin production from the fall going into the spring on anthracnose. Botrytis is just a beast of a problem. Again, there's only a couple of us, by us I mean plant pathologists, and one heavily botrytis infected plant could easily have tens, if not hundreds of millions of spores. And this is why it will always be the problem that it is. And then since I already had AB, I had to go to C, and then I had anthracnose, so I couldn't go to Calotatricum. So cercospora on hydrangea, and it's a really interesting genus of fungi. It's a very interesting one because we're talking about the imperfect state. So the imperfect state is called cercospora, but there are actually multiple genera of the perfect state. So they've managed to co-evolve this long, skinny spore that seems to be very successful in infecting hundreds of different species of plants, which is important to point out. And particularly in hydrangea, it's been a challenge. Also in mum, more recently too. So it seemed like a good C pathogen to go with. So
sounds good, and I'm looking forward to learning more about them. Anytime you talk about botrytis, that's definitely on the Mount Rushmore of plant pathogens that greenhouse and nursery growers deal with. I mean, it's got to be that's in the top three.
It really it's a beast.
Year to year.
It's an absolute beast. So
yeah, cool. Well, why don't we start with A? We'll take them in order. And you're the expert. You've got a long career of educating, so I don't want to get in your way with that. But I do know that when I talk to listeners and just growers and readers of our magazine and stuff like that, they like to know crops that are, I guess, highly susceptible to the disease, what to look for to identify the disease, because I know enough to be dangerous about these things. Not much, but enough to know that some can look like others, and it's really sometimes challenging to identify. And then, of course, prevention or control methods. And
absolutely.
And those products are right in the wheelhouse of Envu. I know that you guys have a good portfolio, and you've done a lot of research and know the efficacy results. So feel free to shout out products and help the listeners figure out ways to tackle these. But why don't you go ahead and start with A?
Yeah, so we're going to start with anthracnose, and I would say one of the big ones is dealing with anthracnose on Sansevieria. Had multiple growers bring that one up in addition to lupin. But some of the other common hosts, because we don't want to leave anyone out, ivy, Hedera ivy is a common one. We do see it on hosta and daylily, and of course lily of the valley as well. I would say woody plants probably are also, they don't suffer the devastation that you see with Sansevieria or lupin, But, dogwood anthracnose took North America by storm, literally and figuratively, where entire forests in Maryland were all but denuded of their dogwood because it was just such a virulent pathogen. We don't hear so much about that now. We have anthracnose-resistant varieties of dogwood that are in the industry. And as the disease moved west, it wasn't quite as pathogenic. There seemed to be some sort of attenuation of the virulence. Other woody hosts, sycamore. If you're a native plant nursery grower, then American sycamore is just so susceptible. It actually gets that craggy form because of all of the anthracnose infections, which I think is really interesting. If you grow the plant in a place where it doesn't have anthracnose, like over in Europe, it actually looks like a basswood. It's absolutely wild. So there's also resistances there. Rose anthracnose is something that gets overlooked quite often, particularly with our disease-resistant rose. I'm a huge fan of the Canadian Explorer Series roses. Have multiple of them in my yard, like whether we're talking, I have William Baffin. I call him Billy Beast because he's monstrous. And then I have Charles Davis. Oh, I'm blanking. Something Davis. It's a pink one. Great. Charles Davis doesn't get the anthracnose, but Billy B absolutely gets anthracnose, which is unfortunate. I know some of the buck roses also get anthracnose. So they don't get, powdery mildew. They don't get black spot, but nature pours a vacuum. There's all of these lovely leaves, and some fungus is going to get in there. And that's what we see. And last but not least, hydrangea, I would say, is probably the big one. Also that we see quite a bit. Not as much as cercospora, and a lot of times people misdiagnose it. But those are just some of the common ones. For those greenhouse growers that produce tomatoes, they don't see it too much in greenhouse production, but of course, I think anybody who grows tomatoes in the Midwest and Southeast are very familiar with anthracnose on their tomatoes and their peppers. So,
and what are some of the symptoms to look for?
So I like to think of anthracnose as a leaf spot with an attitude, and that, unlike our other leaf spots like cercospora or septoria or alternaria, anthracnose will start as a leaf spot and then it works its way down the petiole. And in woody plants, what it'll do is get into the main stem, and it can overwinter there and create the cankering, like what we see in sycamores and also in dogwood. For perennials like lupin or liriope, you end up more with a blight, and it can kill it all the way to the crown of the plant. Daylily, you get more of a leaf spot, but it is kind of a blighty leaf spot. Sansevieria, because it's just like a big leaf, it ends up just really working its way down the leaves. And that one has definitely been a challenge in the industry. And I suspect we're looking at a lot more resistance coming in on liners because some liners will come in clean. This is from the reports of growers, and some come in and they're trying to dig their way out of this problem. And it's a challenge. It's an absolute challenge.
And then thinking about prevention or control, I mean, if it is coming in on your liners, then you're probably looking at control, but are there preventative measures as well?
Absolutely. So, one of the big things, which I'm going to say it and you're going to ignore me, and that's okay, is overhead watering. If you can keep your foliage dry, it will go a long way. It will not stop this disease. If it gets really humid, what happens with anthracnose is the pustule, and it's actually kind of interesting. The word anthracnose actually is derived from the word anthrax, which is, the technical term is a carbuncle, which is just a fancy way of, or not a fancy, an old-fashioned way of saying pustule. So you get this pustule and it's oozing, usually like these pinkish orange salmon spores. And even when it's wet in the humidity, you'll see it start to ooze. But if you have overhead watering, it's going to spread all of those spores. If you have plants packed closely together, it's going to easily splash and spread. It's going to be harder for the plants to dry out, which gives it the, 4 to 7 hours it needs to infect. It doesn't need a long time to infect. I'm making up 4 to 7 hours. I don't know what each and every anthracnose pathogen required. It's not a very long time, and infection happens quick. So you need to prevent that either by making sure your foliage is dry, which is very hard for all of us, or that you have some fungicides in place to prevent the germination, the inoculation, the germination, and the infection of the fungus.
Any any fungicide recommendations?
Absolutely. I would not be me if I didn't have a handful of fungicides to recommend. I am going to lead off with, of course, our own fungicide, Broadform, which sounds incredibly self-serving until you look at the data out there. And Ann Chase has a lovely article about the convenience of 7-Elevens and that they're not all 7-Elevens are equal. And Broadform actually was given a very good to excellent evaluation by her for anthracnose control. So this is something that's going to stay on the surface and really help form a barrier to prevent Choletotricum from infecting. It's performed better than other 7-Elevens. So I feel really good at recommending that. But even though those are two modes of action, it's really, really important to make sure you rotate your chemistry because this disease can really go gangbusters. I published a lot of things on different Choletotricums, and I know this fungus very well, and what it can do is absolutely horrifying. And I have seen 100% loss in some crops, and a lot of resistance. So we want to rotate. There's two partners that are commonly used to rotate for anthracnose. One is Daconil in its various formulations, or chlorothalonil. That one, we have the old saying, spray at white, sleep at night. Certainly an option. You'd want to rotate that. I would say using Broadform 7 to 14 days and Daconil or chlorothalonil every 7 days would be really good. Sometimes, though, you can't use Daconil because of the residue or pollinator issues and things like that. And what I've really liked instead has been Mancozeb. And this is a generic that's been off patent for forever. I think it was developed in the 40s. And I did a lot of my research looking at Mancozeb as a rotation partner. So one, it doesn't have the residue issues. So that's a big plus. It doesn't have some of the bee issues that we have as well. So that's another plus. It's performed really well to control anthracnose in lupins. I haven't heard the reports back on Sansevieria, but I hope I do. But those would be my products, either using Broadform with Daconil as a rotation or Mancozeb. And just going back and forth there. The FRAC3 data, which is a common leaf spot pathogen, I don't recommend here because the data is very inconsistent regarding it. And so this should cover a lot of it. I would add, though, that in the case of lupin anthracnose, there is a lot of work out of Australia. And they actually found even better results than Mancozeb and chlorothalonil using Thiram. So that would be something to consider as a seed treatment. The other thing with lupin anthracnose is trying to make sure that your seed aren't infected. And I think that's where we run into problems is if you're propagating from infected seed, you're never going to get from behind that 8 ball. And that was multiple studies out of Australia. But if you propagate from clean seeds, any of these rotations will go far to protect. And you might not even need these rotations, but trying to make sure you get clean seed is really important.
Yes, your seed supplier is very important.
Very, very important.
I know, working for a seed supply company. Put a lot of effort into keeping those seeds clean. So make sure you're
there's
working with
a cost that, we need to talk about, that, just like you put the cost in to keep the seeds clean, when we're developing products, whether it's Broadform or our new Picarbutrizox product, we're doing the research to say, how can we make these recommendations? And for, it's one graph where we show you that if it hopefully worked, it doesn't always work. And that could cost anywhere from $5,000 to $15,000 to get that one little graph. And when you think of how many graphs that we can show you, it's a lot of reinvestment to show you that the product is as we say it is, and that it performs as we expect.
Absolutely. Here's kind of a question that came up when I was listening to you. So you talked about anthracnose resistance. I guess that's breeding work done with some woody plants. Do you think that's a potential for greenhouse plants in the future? I mean, I know a lot of breeding for resistance to disease, certainly on like vegetable side. And even now we're seeing it in petunias and in the vinca, things like that. Is there potential for anthracnose resistant lupin or, other garden plants?
Actually, there is, and I don't remember what the traits are, but they do have some species of lupin that are less susceptible. I guess I wouldn't go so far as resistant.
Right.
With roses, as I mentioned, I have the two Canadian explorers. One has it and one doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
Nearly Wild was the buck rose. I couldn't think of the name before that seems susceptible to anthracnose, but there's all the other buck roses that aren't as susceptible. So there's definitely the genetics that we can develop and exploit, keeping in mind that, every solution has a problem. That's our job security here.
Yeah.
I would say there's also hosta. There's very few hosta get anthracnose. I always notice it on like the edge of like the variegated varieties. You don't often see it in the green, the normal green leaf, what I would consider phenotypically normal green leaf. So I do think there are options there down the road.
Okay, that'd be cool. Challenge to all the plant breeders and selectors out there.
Absolutely.
All right, you want to move on? You want to move through the alphabet and go to B, Botrytis?
Yes, so that was a pretty bad one this spring. And I think it was because spring was kind of slow to start. And we had a lot of, certainly in the Midwest and then the Northeast, a lot of overcast, gray, cool days, particularly in April, when normally we think things would be starting to warm up and get sunny. And instead we had a lot of gray. And those are the conditions that, Botrytis prefers. With Botrytis, we had people having problems when they were pulling plants out of long-term storage, of course, whether we're talking holly or roses, conifers, starting seeds are always flowers as they break. Camellia and rhododendron are some of the big woody plants. Peony and Botrytis are like peanut butter and jelly, and at least in my mind. So I would say any young plant with perennials, if it's cool and wet, you're going to have problems. And that's the same with annuals. With annuals, vinca, Botrytis, vinca, calibrachoa, geranium, impatiens, cyclamen, begonia, poinsettia, primrose, kalanchoe, orchids. Some palms even have problems with Botrytis. So bulbs also. That was I got to watch my tulips get knocked down from tulip fire. So, which is a different species of Botrytis. That's Botrytis tulipae instead of Botrytis cinerea. So, always a good time.
Right, and it sounds like just about any crop at this point.
I think so. I'm not sure I've seen it on grasses, but never say never.
Right. And what are some symptoms to look for? And they're probably different. I mean, with all those different plants that you just mentioned, but is there any sort of identification commonality in Botrytis?
Yeah. So the key sign in this case, because you're looking at the fungus, is the gray mold, and it's just a mass of gray spores. Symptoms start as a leaf spot or even a flower blight. Trying to keep up on the deadheading, particularly for your bedding plants, is huge because Botrytis likes to get in on the weakest link, which would be your senescing flowers. And then the flower falls on the leaf and the fungus is like building up its energy reserves. I think of it as like, kind of like this like Power Ranger thing where it just starts to expand as it's eating, dying petals, and then it can invade the leaf, and then it goes into the stem, and then you end up with a crown rot as well. And it does that for all of them. So.
Okay. And the $1 million question, prevention and control.
Yeah. Get your pen and papers ready because this is a lot of products. Everybody would like to keep the rotation simple, but Botrytis, another crop I've worked on in the past. I think in certain crops like grape and strawberry, they have found Botrytis pathogens, Botrytis cinerea, with more than 9 different fungicide resistances. I think we're only up to 6 in ornamentals, but never say never. We can do it. We can get to resistances and everything, and that's a huge problem because we do not have product to keep up with this. And this is why using a lot of product in rotation is key. So I like to start off with recommending Chipko, which is a FRAC 2, which is an Envu product. And then in between, going to either a Daconil, a chlorothalonil product. You could also use a Mancozeb as well, a very good product. If you want to go really old school, you could throw in Captan, but it's hot, which is why I go back to Mancozeb. I think it's a safer product for most applications. And I like to put a Frac M in between there as like a cleanup lap. So if anything is resistant, Frac M, meaning multi-site, means that resistance is probably not going to be able to persist through that Frac M application. So I think of it as like a cleanup lap. It's like the Zamboni of fungicides. At least that's how it works in my head.
Yeah.
I want everyone to have that mental image of like the little Zamboni.
Right.
And then I go to Broadform, which is a 7-Eleven. And I recommend that. And I like this one because it actually has, Ann Chase evaluated it from good to excellent, reliably. It's performed outstanding on a number of different bedding plants, and I've used it for peonies and whatnot. And what's interesting is, in the heyday of the strobies, everybody was all about systemic. But when you think about botrytis, you don't want it systemic. You want the fungicide as a barrier, keeping the botrytis out of the plant. And, Compass is not particularly that the 11 component, the trifloxystrobin, is not very systemic. It's more translaminar. And so by not being systemic, I think that's why we see better control than some of the others that boast that this is super systemic. And that's been found in multiple trials. From there, I would, again, go to that cleanup Zamboni step with Mancozeb or chlorothalonil, and then switch to Affirm. And so Affirm or Veranda or any polyoxin D is a Frac 19 fungicide. It's a softer chemistry, but it's very good on botrytis, and I like to mix it up. Again, go back to our Zamboni step, and then follow up with Medallion, which is Frac 12. If you really want to go crazy, you can follow up once again with your Zamboni, Mancozeb, or chlorothalonil. And the last one I would say is Decree, which is a fenhexamide. And I believe that is a Frac 17.
Okay. So that's a big rotation.
That is a big rotation. But the problem with this rotation is we know of reports of resistance of Medallion. We know of reports of resistance with Decree. And we know of reports of resistance with Chipco. We also know that there are reports in 7-Elevens. As of the most recent research, Broadform has less issues than others because it was the last one to the party.
Right.
But we want to try and keep it that way. So having these robust rotations takes the pressure off any one AI. Having that Zamboni step also cleans it up. Of course, cultural control is huge. If you see infected plants, rogue them. You can't, when you've got a tiny lesion with 600,000 spores, you're not going to clean it up. You got to get rid of it. And you want to get rid of those spores because all it takes is one spore for resistance to get established. And the more spores you have, the more likely resistance is going to sneak its way in there.
Does botrytis overwinter in a greenhouse?
It can if you have a lot of debris there. It depends on the species of botrytis, and that's something to bring up. There's actually dozens. They're not all botrytis scenaria. And they can create these little fungus balls we call sclerotia, and they're going to overwinter on your botrytis. So very important to have a sanitation step in your greenhouse and stay up on any infected plants and roguing them along the way.
When we talk a lot about breaking the green bridge, making sure you're taking a step between crops to deep clean, get all that debris out of there so that you got a better chance of starting clean. So it sounds like botrytis is one of those things that you can make some headway on if you really pay close attention to sanitation.
Absolutely. And your overhead watering, botrytis really likes the humidity. Venting your greenhouse, that's like the hardest thing to convince growers, particularly as you go into winter, because they're like, oh my God, I just spent so much money to make this air warm and I'm flushing it out the greenhouse. But, I probably shouldn't be telling you this because I work on the chemical side of things, but you will save money if you vent your greenhouse and get that, warm, moist air out of there, probably equal to the amount you spend on fungicides. But most growers would rather spend money on fungicides than on heat. So I get it. But it is something to think about. Having your fans, your horizontal airflow fans to keep the air moving, that stagnant air is really important.
Okay. No, I think that's all really good advice. You want to go to C, cercospora?
Cercospora. Yeah. So, boy, I had a experience last year down in, I don't remember, but I think I was in South Carolina. Could have been North Carolina. And it was a certain variety of hydrangea completely defoliated by cercospora. Mac hydrangeas, of course. You do see it also on your oak leaf hydrangeas, though, as well. I have a dogwood in my backyard. It's actually called a Cornelian cherry. I don't know if people are familiar with it. It's this big fruit. It looks just like a cherry, and if you bite into it, you will spit it like 1,000 feet.
It doesn't taste like a cherry.
So sour, but sugar and lemon hides a multitude of sins, and it makes a really good jam. And you throw some amaretto in there, and it's actually pretty tasty.
Okay.
But that one gets cercospora like nobody's business. My point there. Winterberry is another one that really, really significant cercospora. My colleague Francesco Peduto-Hand did some wonderful work on that at Ohio State. And going back to hydrangea, Folia Baselgarel has done some wonderful work at Tennessee State looking at control of it in hydrangea and I believe dogwood too. So Pittosporum? Pittosporum or Pittosporum? I would say Pittosporum, but I hear people say Pittosporum. So that one tends to get some cercospora along with crepe myrtle.
Okay.
Perennials, I see it on hollyhock, at least in my own backyard. Snaps, hosta, sometimes on ficus. Ornamental peppers would be the annuals. Pretty much any annual can get it. It's just not very common on any one. Like I think of like dogwood and hydrangea kind of levels.
Well, I think with more and more greenhouses producing hydrangeas with all the awesome new breeding out there, this seems like something that they got to pay close attention to.
It really is. I was looking in my backyard and I have so many hydrangea and it's like, I remember going to cultivate and it's like, I definitely don't need any more hydrangea. Oh, what is that hydrangea? It's
right.
Like,
they're amazing.
Yeah. And everybody's coming out with some spectacular ones. So, shout out to the breeders. Please make sure they are disease resistant because there is nothing sadder than getting something to flowering size and then having it completely defoliated from cercospora. But when we're trying to manage that, again, spacing is really important early on. Fertility also, because really, especially when you look at hydrangea, if the cercospora isn't defoliating it, spider mites could be. So keeping them fertile, keeping them moist, because hydrangeas like it wet. So that's often important. So spacing, watering, fertility, it helps, but you can do all of those things right, and some of them are still going to get cercospora.
Okay.
So,
what about control? What are we going after cercospora with?
Yeah, I'm going back to my standby rotation here, looking at Broadform is what I'm going to lead off with. Outstanding control. Again, not just our trial data, and Chase has done this. Work out of multiple labs has shown it as well. And then I would say you could rotate with either Menkazeb or chlorothalonil again. You're both going to have those longer REIs, but you'll have to decide what's acceptable. Remember with those blooms, we want to be careful. So that's why I throw both of those out there. Cercospora can develop resistance. We see it in a lot of cercospora pathogens. The most famous would be the one that affects bananas. So we want to make sure we're on top of the fungicide resistance issues there. So start with Broadform, rotate to a Menkazeb or a chlorothalonil. But here's where we bring in our frac 3s, and our frac 3s are great for cercospora. We don't like frac 3s for Botrytis. They generally are not going to be very effective or as effective. And when you use something like a 3+7, you're putting a lot of pressure on your 7. The 3 is not carrying its weight. So that's why I'm not a big fan of the 3+7 pairing for Botrytis control. But for cercospora control, that would be a good pairing. But again, if you have Broadform as your 7+11, you don't want to put a 3+7 in there because
do another
double dipping.
Right.
Not cool. But the good news is there's lots of 3s and there's lots of very good 3s out there that provide good control. Anyone who knows me knows that I'm all about Team Eagle. I've used it for so long and so often. I don't even know what people talk about when they say it smells. I can't smell it. But I believe you. I think you're a little nuts, but I'll believe you. I'll take your word. Terragard is also it's an older fungicide. It's great. Torque has very good data, as so does Tourney. There are other options available, some of them more expensive than others. Eagle has that 24-hour REI, which everyone hates, including me, but based on the cost and the efficacy, it's still my number one. If you can't stand the 24-hour REI, I would look at, TerraGuard, Torque, and Tourney, and, based on what you have, what you're using for other things, and your cost.
Okay. And do you find that, so like if a grower uses that rotation, which I think for 4 or 5 different products, are they going to get pretty good control of cercospora? I mean, is that...
They should. With anything, the only times I hear there aren't problems is I have to go back and look at coverage. And you always, for all of these applications, you want to make sure you're using your fine droplets.
Yep.
I wouldn't go extra fine, because sometimes with extra fine, you end up with not enough product to give you the protection you want. So I like the fine droplets. You want to make sure your droplets stay on the leaf.
Yeah.
Sometimes you might want to use a sticker. Be careful with your spreader stickers, because if it spreads, it could run off the leaf. So, but make sure you have your fungicide where you're trying to get your disease. And especially when you're using something like a mancozeb or a chlorothalonil, which is a contact fungicide, you want to make sure you're getting to the underside of the leaf, because if you don't spray the underside of the leaf, the fungicide isn't going to get there. Right. It isn't Broadform, where it's going to move translaminarly through your leaf. It isn't Eagle or Avelio, where it will move systemically throughout your leaf. It's only going to go where you put it. And so coverage is key. If your coverage is good and you're still not getting control, you probably started too late. So,
gotcha.
And then the last one I check, and I probably should do that first, is calibration. It's very easy to drop a decimal point. Too much or too little, in my experience. So those are where I always start to check if I'm having control issues.
Okay. All good best practices.
Yeah. A lot of times when something goes sideways, I think it is human nature to blame the product and say, oh, I have fungicide resistance. But in my experience, most of the time it isn't fungicide resistance. It is applying too late, miscalibration, and not good coverage.
Okay. Now, we talked a lot about rotations with all 3, with anthracnose, with Botrytis, with cercospora, and really with any insect or disease like that you're treating for. Rotation is so critical. And I think while I've got you here, let's talk a little bit about just your general thoughts on rotation or resistance management, I guess is what it's all about, because I really don't think that our industry can talk about this enough, because we don't want to lose tools in the toolbox. We don't want to, I mean, you and I talked before we started recording about how quickly populations can reproduce, whether it is an insect or a fungus, and how quickly resistance can happen. And then growers are losing tools, or they're not going to see the control that they expect from products. I think
those
they're big threats. And I know it's a passion of yours.
It's a huge threat. And the reality is, and I actually, one of the last papers I wrote was actually looking at trends in fungicide development. And what you can see in the paper, and it's available online, you can see the trend that we are producing fewer and fewer products, and there's less diversity in our AIs, which also isn't good, because it doesn't matter if we come out with a new product if the AI is what we already have resistance to. It might be a little more intrinsically active for a while, but resistance is still a specter that it's a boogeyman that you have to be conscious of, and always, we aren't just managing plants. We're not just managing pests. We have to manage the products as well. And that's a lot of integration for a grower, because they're juggling so many balls already. They're trying to manage their disease. They're trying to manage their insects. They're trying to manage their weeds. They're trying to manage their plants. And at the end of the day, they want to, of course, turn a profit. And a lot of them end up, it's so easy to use fewer products and fewer AIs. It's simpler on the brain. It's simpler to the bottom line, but this is I think a penny wise and pound foolish approach. In that what you save in the short term is going to be incredibly costly for all of us as an industry in the long term, because we don't have the AIs that we used to.
Yeah.
And so we really need to steward them well.
And you don't hear new AIs coming to market that quickly. I mean, you hear about it here and there, but it's not, I don't think for a company like Envu, the cost and time that goes into developing new products is so high that it's not like, oh, well, we've got resistance here, let's throw a new product at it. It doesn't happen like that.
And I think we were so spoiled early on in the heydays of like the early 70s to the early 80s where, oh, we got resistance, but we have a new product and a new AI. We had thiophanate methyl, Clary's 3336, and it was incredible. And we overused the bejesus out of it and had resistance. But then suddenly we had DMI fungicides. This is back in the day where people thought triforing was the second coming. And now we laugh at how weak it is. But and then we got resistance to that, and we had new, more intrinsically active DMIs. But as that resistance developed, we had our strobilurins, and then we have our STHIs. But we're seeing resistance pile on top of resistance, pile on top of resistance, and it's a huge issue. And it isn't just in fungicides. We are seeing this all across pest management and in the human realm as well with antibiotics. So microbes are going to win. They're smarter than we are. They are more fecund. They produce, they make money. They put bunny rabbits to shame. So
yeah, it's true. Well, that just underscores the importance of rotation, of following. Everybody has access to frac charts, and I mean, there's so much research that's been done from companies like Envu and from independent researchers.
Absolutely.
You mentioned Dan Chase. I mean, everybody's putting together these rotations that include all sorts of products, whether they're from your company or not, because everybody wants to try to manage this issue. So just good. Well, I just wanted to, while I had you, I wanted to talk just the importance of rotation. Just, we can't say it enough.
Exactly. And reach out to your DSR reps, reach out to your technical managers like myself. It doesn't have to just be Envu. There's a lot of really great people, whether we're looking in the seed side of things or the plant side of things, whether we're brokers or pesticide reps or DSRs. There's a lot of knowledge there. And just keep asking questions. It's really important. And there is, when it comes to a lot of these products, I'm very agnostic. I want what works. So I'm really happy to work for Envu because I think we have a lot of really great products, but I am well aware that our competitors have a lot of great products. And I think all of us want throughout the industry for people to be successful.
No, and that's awesome. I like to hear that. And I think it just, we want our industry to survive into the future with great plants going to market. And that's just one big step in the process.
We're all growing together. That's like our purpose. Yes. So
I like it.
We're all learning and we're all growing together.
So true. So true. As we wrap up, I always like to leave some time for final thoughts. Maybe something we've missed or a concept you want to reiterate. Anything you want to close with?
Keep your eyes open for new things. And even just new for you. The rust we had on the buckthorn. I've seen it for a while, but it never dawned on me that it could be a problem in a nursery and that people would refuse shipments. So that was. Which I understand because it was a kind of nasty looking bright orange pustule. So so I do get that. But I just go back. I live in the Midwest for now. I'm moving in another month, but and I'm moving to where emerald ash borer is now a problem. It's been announced in Denver. And I just always
you get to deal with it again.
I have an ash tree in my front yard to make it even worse. So I had
3 ash trees removed within a year between our house in Chicago and our house in Cleveland.
I'm gonna treat and see what I'll keep you all posted. But I'm just haunted by what happened in Detroit. That this is something that if people would have been on top of seeing things and said, "Hey, this looks a little odd. What's going on?" It was stoppable. I mean, it might have been unlikely, but it was possible. And I know, like with Asian longhorn beetle, they're more successful. So if you see something weird, reach out. Send a picture to your DSR. Send it to your sales rep. Send it to your technical manager, myself or others. Get eyes on the problem. So we don't end up with, an emerald ash borer, an Asian longhorn beetle, or sudden oak death. I mean, we're remorum canker. We know that started probably in a nursery somewhere. These are things that the more proactive we are, it's only going to be better for all of us in the industry.
See something, say something.
Exactly.
And that's actually a good segue, because can you reach out to technical experts like Janna, like the folks at Envu, like any other technical reps that you deal with. Where can listeners find out more about Broadform, Envu, all of your different solutions for greenhouse and nursery growers? What's the best place to reach out and connect?
I would say there's, of course, our website at envu.com, but they can, of course, always reach out to me personally, which is just janna.beckerman@envu.com.
Awesome. And I know that you're always happy to talk to growers and hear about challenges that you can help them solve. That's
the best part of my day. Seriously. It is. Everybody laughs at me. I don't know why they laugh at me, but it's
true.
It's totally the truth. So yeah, that's why I left academia. I get to talk with growers more than I've ever gotten to in my life. It's awesome.
That's great. And I know that they appreciate it, and I appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time.
I love getting to talk with you always, Bill.
And we'll have to find, I'm sure we'll find some more topics to talk about as we go.
Rust.
But rust. Okay. All right. I'll put it on the list.
Okay.
Sounds like a good one. I've had it on my lawn. I know that I've mowed the lawn and looked at my shoes afterwards and thought,
I love that.
Better treat for that.
And you're wearing your orange rust hat today too. So it's almost like.
I am. Well, before I close, let me shout out a few other places you can hear from Dr. Beckerman in the portfolio of Ball Publishing Media. Janna and Steve Larson from Envu previously joined me on podcast 186 to talk about pre-emergence weed control. And they're also have joined or will join, depending on when this episode's released, Chris Beatty's for a live stream about developing comprehensive weed control programs. That should be a good one. I think, you guys are going to be perfect, and Chris is a good host. So.
And Steve's fantastic on weeds. Yeah. So he's just absolutely spot on.
Cool. Well, I'll make sure to tune in for that one. I'll put links to both of those in the show notes. And like I said, I'm sure that you and I will talk again in the near future.
Sounds good. I look forward to it.
Cool. And on behalf of Dr. Janna Beckerman and the entire Envu team, I'm Bill Calkins with Tech on Demand, wishing you a fantastic production season. Take care out there.